Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. So today I wanted to finally sit down and talk about the Booker International this year. So I've been ill for the past week, and that is the delay in videos is because of that. And the week before that I was really busy with work. So it's just been a very hectic March, and I haven't had any time or energy to sit down and film until now. So yeah, today I wanted to talk about the Booker International. I always really liked this particular prize and following it because it's a fantastic way to discover translated literature as well as seeing the conversation going about translated literature in general. And reading books in translation is something that I've been trying to make more of a priority in my reading. I was looking at the long list for the Booker International that came out in, I want to say, about a week ago, sometime early in March, and most of the titles sounded intriguing to me, so I sort of have the lofty ambition of wanting to read as many of them as I can before the winner is announced in May. I don't remember the exact date, and I know for a fact that I won't be able to read all of them because there's a few chunkers and I haven't got hold of all of them yet. I have ordered several of them, and some of them I will be picking up from my library in the next week. But I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the books on the long list, my general interest in them, and sort of my plans with them as well, as an overview, and I figured that this would be a nice sort of starting point to have so that when we're coming up to the winner announcement, I can maybe do a wrap-up of the books I got to and potentially a winner prediction. That is the hope. We'll see if I get to these or it's just a dream plan. I might get to some of these books later after the winner is announced, but I would really love to get to as many as I can, as I said. So let's start talking about the books themselves. And so there's 13 books on the list. The first one is Paradais by Fernanda Melchor, and this is translated by Sophie Hughes. This is a fairly short book, shorter than the author's previous book, Hurricane Season, that was nominated for the long list in 2020. I read it. It was brutal and unflinching, and because Fernanda Melchor in that book doesn't use a lot of punctuation, it just feels like you can't breathe with all of the non-stop violence and non-stop things happening. So that was a very, very intense reading experience. I'm sure that Paradise will be as well, but I also find Fernanda Melchor to be a really interesting person. I've watched a few of her interviews, both in connection with Hurricane Season and in general with the Swedish Book Fair. She did a few talks in connection with that as well, and she just seems to have a lot of interesting things to say. So this particular book says, written in a chilling torrent of prose by one of Mexico's most thrilling new writers, Paradise explores the explosive fragility of Mexican society. So this one has just come out or is about to come out, but I have made an order for that one. The next title is Heaven by Mieko Kawakami, and this was translated by Samuel Bett and David Boyd. Another author that I'm familiar with. I haven't read her previous book, Breasts and Eggs, but I have it on my shelves and would really like to read it. But this one particularly is about bullying, and I've seen some really interesting reviews of it. This was one of the books on the long list that I had already been interested in reading, and honestly the only reason I haven't gotten to it is because I want to get to Breasts and Eggs first. But this is a much shorter book, and I think some people that didn't like her previous book enjoyed this one more, so that also is intriguing. The next book on the title is actually one I've started reading, and that is Love in the Big City by Sang-Yoon Park, translated by Anton Hur. And this is one of the books that he has translated that has ended up on the long list. So this is a queer Korean book about two young people living their lives, and they sort of have kind of partying lifestyle. One of them is a gay man and the other one is a woman who sort of has a lot of short-term relationships, and they live together for a few years and bond over sort of being slightly different, being kind of free in their mentality to life, and so I've started reading this one, and I'm not entirely sure where it's gonna go, what parts of the story it's gonna be following. I just sort of went into it blind. Aside from knowing the friendship theme and the queer theme, I sort of went into it blind, but I'm really enjoying the tone of it. It's very playful and fun. If you read a lot of translated literature, you'll notice that a lot of the books that get translated are depressing, heavy type themes and topics and all of that. And this book doesn't seem to be void of those types of topics, but the tone is definitely different and more playful, as I said, and uplifting in a not sugary way. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far, and we'll be talking about it when I finished it. The next one is Happy Stories Mostly by Norman Erikson Pasaribu, and this was translated by Tiffany Tsao. This is one of the Tilted Axis press books. Again, this is probably the press that is most frequent in this long list, and this is a short story collection. That sounded really interesting. I hadn't really heard anything about this book in particular. I'd seen it, I recognized the cover of it, but I hadn't heard anything specifically about this title, and it says, powerful blend of science fiction, absurdism, and alternative historical realism that aims to destabilize the heteronormative world and expose its underlying rot. The destabilize the heteronormative world is honestly the only thing I need to be interested in this one. But the description of the short stories themselves also sounded really interesting, and Tilted Axis is definitely one of those presses that I'm always intrigued by what they do. And short stories is always fun as a way to explore a new author. Again, one of the ones that I have ordered. The next one is Elena Nose by Claudia Piñeiro, and this was translated by Frances Riddle. This was one that I knew about because of Sarah from Hardcover Hearts talked about this book when she read it, I think at the end of last year, and she really, really liked it. And since hearing her talking about it, I had been meaning to get to it and had actually requested my library to buy a copy. I just didn't get around to picking it up from the library before the winter holidays, and then I sort of forgot about it. So when it was put on the long list, I knew that I needed to prioritize it. So as soon as I get hold of it through my library, I will be reading it. And I also just heard that Mieko from Knowledge Lost also loved this book. So those are two people whose taste I really trust. And this one says, a unique story that interweaves crime fiction with intimate tales of morality and the search for individual freedom. And I feel like it is somehow centered around motherhood, which is one of my sort of keywords when it comes to storyline synopsis. The next title we have is The Book of Mother by Violaine Huisman, and this was translated by Leslie Camhi. This is one of the ones on the long list that I hadn't heard anything about. I didn't recognize the name or the cover or anything, which is always really exciting when a prize becomes a tool of discovery as well. But the synopsis of this one was just so intriguing to me. So this is definitely one of the ones that I'm most interested in, and I have ordered this one. It is about a mother-daughter relationship where the mother is sort of exuberant and worldly and charming and seems to sort of draw people to her, but that also being kind of a shortcoming sometimes with her relationships. And about the daughter being sort of both in awe of her mother and I think, seeing the flaws in all of those charming qualities. That is the impression I'm getting. Beautiful and charismatic Catherine, aka Maman, smokes too much, drives too fast, laughs too hard, and loves too extravagantly. During a joyful and chaotic childhood in Paris, her daughter Violaine wouldn't have it any other way, but when Maman is hospitalized after a third divorce and breakdown, everything changes. So this sounds like it could be absolutely fantastic, and it will probably be one of the ones I get to earlier out of my order. If it arrives before the other things, that is. Then the next one is a previous award winner for the Booker International, or it's by a previous award winner. So it is More Than I Love My Life by David Grossman, and translated by Jessica Cohen. He won the prize for his A Horse Walks Into a Bar, I think is the title. And this author and this particular book is probably one of the ones that I'm least interested in, just based on the synopsis. I don't really know anything about this author in particular, and I wasn't that interested in his previous book either. But it seems like at least this book is somewhat about motherhood, which is always intriguing to me, as I mentioned before. But it says, sweeping story about loving with courage that asks us to confront our deepest held beliefs about a woman's duty to herself and to her children. But there was just nothing about the synopsis that immediately intrigued me. But I will be getting this one out from my library to try it out because I saw that it was available. So I will try it, maybe do like a try a chapter thing for it, and we'll see. If I feel grabbed by it, then I will try to give it a proper go. If not, then I will just sort of move on to other things. But as I said, this is one of the ones that I was less intrigued about. Next we have Phenotypes by Paulo Scott, and this was translated by Daniel Hahn. This is a story about brotherhood, which is probably a theme that I don't read that much of. I read a lot of books related to motherhood and sometimes sisterhood, I think, but not that often about brothers. So that was already interesting to me. And then there's also a racial thread in the story. It's set in Brazil, or it's by a Brazilian author, and I assume it's set in Brazil as well. It says, in this complex tale, two very different brothers of mixed black and white heritage are divided by the color of their skin as racial tension rises in society and a guilty secret resurfaces from their shared past. So both the brotherhood and race-related topics sounded interesting, and again, one I will be getting out from my library. The next one is a Norwegian author. This is A New Name, Septology 6-7 by Jon Fosse. Jon Fosse, and this is translated to the English by Damion Searls. I have ordered this one actually in the English, even though I would have loved to read this one in the Swedish translation. I don't think that this volume has been translated into Swedish yet. But the gist I'm getting from this book, or this series of books by Jon Fosse, is that it's sort of stream of consciousness, fragments style stuff with very few punctuation marks, and that it's sort of conversations between a painter and someone else, like a philosopher or something. It says, Asle is an aging painter who lives alone on the coast of Norway. His only friends are his neighbor Osleik, a traditional fisherman farmer, and Beyer, a gallerist who lives in the city. And written in melodious and hypnotic slow prose. This is the final installment of Fosse's Septology. It could either be really interesting or just sort of feel like it is pointless. But I've been intrigued by the previous installments of this book, so I decided to actually just order this one. I haven't read the previous installments in the Septology, but I figured if it's on the long list, then it should, in my opinion, stand on its own as a book. I think if it's if it's nominated for this particular book and not the entire series, then it should be able to stand on its own without pre-knowledge of the other volumes. So that is how I'm going to be approaching it. I will be trying to read this one without having read the previous ones, and we'll see how that goes. Next one is a Danish author. This is After the Sun by Jonas and translated to the English by Sherilyn Hellberg. I am going to be trying this one out in the Swedish, and this is the other one of the list that I am least interested in based on the synopsis. It could I could change my mind based on reading them, of course, or trying them out, but I'm really grateful that I have access to this one through my library, because I wouldn't be buying this one. This is another sci-fi type stuff with, I think, sexuality being one of the main themes, which is interesting, but the synopsis itself makes me kind of confused about it, so I'm not entirely sure what to expect. But it says, with irrepressible urgency, Eike's astonishing fiction juxtaposes startling beauty with grotesquerie and balances the hyper-realistic with the fantastical. And I think there's something about AI in this story, but I could be wrong. Either way, it sounds really weird, but it could be weird in a good way, so we'll see. Then the next one I can't get hold of and I would love to read, but as I said, I will just have to wait until I can order it. It is Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree, and this is translated by Daisy Rockwell. Apparently this is one of the first Indian authors that has been nominated. It is a chunker of a book about following a elderly protagonist, and I think she's sort of looking back on her life. In northern India, an 80-year-old woman slips into a deep depression at the death of her husband, then resurfaces to gain a new lease of life. Her determination to fly in the face of convention confuses her bohemian daughter, who is used to thinking of herself as the more modern of the two. To her family's consternation, Ma then insists on traveling to Pakistan, confronting the unresolved trauma of her teenage experiences of partition. Despite its serious theme, Geetanjali Shree's light touch and exuberant wordplay ensures that Tomb of Sand remains constantly playful and utterly original. I mean, this sounds fantastic, so I would really like to read this one. And also the short description of it says that it's sort of playing with borders between religions and countries and genders. And I mean, everything about the description of this sounds like it could be well worth the read, even if it's a chunker. But it's sold out, so I'm waiting for the reprint of this to be available for order before I can get hold of this one. The next one is the other chunker on the list, and that is The Book of Jacobs by Olga Tokarczuk, and this was translated by Jennifer Croft, of course. And this was one of the, I think, most anticipated releases of last year in terms of translation, translated fiction, that is. And it had actually been translated into Swedish a year prior to the English translation, and I've been meaning to read it for a while, but I just hadn't gotten around to it because, as I said, it's a chunker. It's a historical fiction book set in the Enlightenment Europe, on the cusp of precipitous change, searching for certainty and longing for transcendence. I'm assuming it's going to be kind of an epic historical fiction based on the size of this one and sort of the tone that I'm getting from the description of it. And then the last book on the long list is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, and this is the other title that was translated by Anton Hur. This is a short story collection, and the short stories are supposed to be sort of horror-ish, absurdist, grotesque, weird stuff. And the reviews I've seen of this makes me think I will love it. I know that Yamini really liked it, Yamini from the Invisible Cities group. It is published by Humford Star. That is another press that I'm really interested in and want to sort of pay attention to more. I actually requested my library to buy a copy of this one last year, so again, this is one I will get out from my library to borrow to read, hopefully in the near future. So those are all of the books on the Booker International and some general thoughts and plans. Like I've mentioned mostly, I am pretty much planning to try every book on the long list if I can get hold of them. Tomb of Sand is the only one that at the moment is unclear, and the other ones mostly I will probably be able to find through my library, or aside from the ones that I have already ordered that will be arriving in the next few weeks, hopefully. But I'm really excited about this long list, and even if I don't get to all of these before the winner is announced in May, then I will have some interesting reading to do throughout the year. So it's all good. So I would love to know if you're planning to read along with the Booker International this year, if any of the books on the long list sounded particularly intriguing to you, if you've read any of them already. I would love to know any and all thoughts about the prize or the long list or these books. Any you think I will like more than others. All of these things, please share in the comments below. I hope you're doing well, you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.